Sweden. For decades, admired as the perfect society, a country of trust, equality, and prosperity. Where crime was rare, institutions worked, and the Swedish model became a global example. But today, the headlines are very different. Daily shootings, gang violence, and neighborhoods where police hesitate to enter. How did this nation, once a utopia in the eyes of the world, arrive at such a crisis? Post-war Sweden became known as the Nordic paradise. Its economy grew rapidly, fueled by strong industries and a model of high taxes balanced by generous welfare benefits. This became known as the Swedish model, combining capitalism with social equality. By the 1970s, Sweden had one of the highest standards of living in the world. Trust was the cornerstone. People trusted their neighbors, their institutions, and their government. The nation was safe, stable, and envied across the globe. But in the 1990s, and especially after the refugee crises of the 2010s, Sweden took a different path. Driven by humanitarian values, it opened its doors wide to immigrants and asylum seekers. Between 2010 and 2017 alone, Sweden accepted more refugees per capita than any other EU country. Many came from Muslim-majority nations: Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, and Somalia. At first, the world praised Sweden's generosity. But inside the country, challenges were mounting. Integration was far more difficult than expected. Unemployment among migrants stayed high, with language barriers and cultural differences creating divisions. Entire suburbs became dominated by immigrant populations, forming what many called parallel societies. Then came the crime wave. Sweden, once known as one of the safest countries on earth, began to see something new: gang shootings, grenade attacks, and car burnings. According to Swedish police, much of this violence was linked to criminal networks rooted in immigrant communities. By the late 2010s, Sweden recorded some of the highest gun homicide rates in Europe, a shocking statistic for a country once considered peaceful. Cities like Malmö and Gothenburg became symbols of this crisis. Entire neighborhoods saw rising violence, while trust in police and institutions began to erode. The most dramatic images came from riots. In 2013, clashes broke out in Stockholm suburbs after a police shooting. In 2020 and 2022, riots again erupted after Koran burnings, exposing deep cultural tensions between immigrant groups and Swedish society. In many districts, locals began calling them no-go zones, areas where Swedish law had little authority and where gangs often ruled. This crisis changed Swedish politics forever. For decades, Sweden's mainstream parties promoted openness and diversity. But as violence rose, so did support for right-wing populist parties who promised stricter immigration laws and tougher policing. The political debate grew bitter. Should Sweden blame immigration itself? Or the failure to integrate newcomers? One side argues it was idealism without preparation. The other says Sweden betrayed its values by stigmatizing minorities instead of supporting them. Today, Sweden is no longer the unquestioned perfect society. It is a nation deeply divided, proud of its humanitarian ideals, but scarred by the unintended consequences. Sweden's story is a warning to the world. Compassion is vital, but without integration, even the strongest societies can fracture. Sweden was once the model nation. Today, it is a case study of how utopias can collapse and how ideals must meet reality. This is Sweden, from utopia to crisis.